Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for, monthly hell, aka Why You Know Review, where I talk about a whole bunch of records all at once that I didn't get to do a formal review on from this past month, April, and just wanted to touch down on them a little bit, not necessarily saying they're terrible, not necessarily saying that they're the worst thing ever. Some of them are pretty decent, but maybe weren't my cup of tea, but I think that they might still be worth checking out for you if, you're into that sort of thing. So please, if you love me, allow me to make this segment as painless as possible and just sort of breeze through these records. I'm going to list all the titles down there in the description box. They'll also be popping up here on the screen as I'm going through the records first. The new Protomartyr record. Now, if you're into really reverb-soaked, kind of gothic post-punk music, then check this record out. I think there are some good tunes on this thing, but there were some shorter tracks on here that I didn't think were that special. I wasn't that impressed with the vocals. I just thought it was a little bland, a little run-of-the-mill for the style of music, but if you're totally crazy into it, then I recommend you check it out. Next, the new Current 93 record. This is some pretty interesting experimental folk music. Really progressive, really strange, and admittedly, for as long-running as the band is, and David Tibet has been making music under this pseudonym in this project for years, not terribly familiar with them. Not even gonna front, not even gonna pretend. I was actually talking with Mike Seatown, who is actually a huge fan of this band. Mike Seatown from Dead End Hip Hop, sort of getting his opinions on this record, sort of letting me know where it sits for him in the entire Current 93 discography, because they do have a pretty sizable discography. And at least from my point of view, while I didn't dislike this record, it just felt like maybe it's not the best entry point for somebody who's like not that familiar with the band. Mostly because the project seems to be so personality driven. I mean, you have folk instrumentation, really layered, really strange, and over that, David Tibet's very odd and very impassioned poetry. He is so over the top, he is so theatrical over this instrumentation that it just makes me feel like, okay, maybe I need to try to get into one of their more accessible records or something like that. And then once I get a taste for his personality and really enjoy and sort of see what he's doing lyrically and really sort of just appreciate his eccentricities, then I can come into something like this that is a little stronger. The new Danger EP, if you're in the market for like some French house, some electro house, you might want to try this thing out, especially since it has some 80s progressive synthesizer music in there. 80s, 70s, some very epic soundtrack-worthy stuff. But for Danger, I didn't really find this new material to be all that special or cutting edge or interesting, and I've been waiting so long for a new EP from this guy. This dude was definitely much more popular when he was coming out with music around the time that Justice was really hot, when people were like really dying to hear more French house stuff. And since then, his output has kind of petered out and has grown less interesting. There's the new Gridlink record if you're looking for some grindcore that has some ultra melodic guitars that are just so all over the place. I mean, this record really is way more melodic than you would ever expect a grindcore record to be. It does make them quite a unique act in grindcore music. However, it is just so intense. It is so dense. It is so just nonstop. It is so relentless that even someone like me, who usually advocates for music that goes that route, was kind of like, ho, hey, ho, hawawa. This is really a test. This is a test of your attention span, despite the fact that the record is only like 20 or so minutes, but it's also a test of your physiological self. I don't think people who are unfit physically can really appreciate this music. I think you have to be like, at peak physical condition to really get into to what the band is doing on this record, because the drum beats are just so they're so relentless. The vocals are this shrill, retching, throaty. I get winded just listening to 2 tracks off of this thing. But if you're looking for extremity, next, the new Afghan Whigs record, kind of their comeback record, alternative rock band, made a lot of great records in the 90s that people really fawn over. However, you know, for me, this is just kind of a disappointing comeback for them. Not to say that I was really hotly anticipating this record. I've never really been much more than a casual Afghan Whigs fan. But on this LP, I mean, the vocals just strain and strain and strain and strain, and a lot of the instrumentation just seems so run-of-the-mill, you know, for alternative rock. And when the vocals aren't straining, to me, they have kind of a goofy personality to them. You don't have to agree with me, it's just my point of view on it, you know, it's just how they feel to me. Just not liking this record. Someone who I'm even less invested in, the new Roth record. I don't even remember the title of this record. I completely forgot the title of this record. Retro Hash, that's it. And that's because my brain is trying to do me a favor of erasing this record from my memory, because it is such awful, boring, generic, lifeless, meaningless stoner rap that, I mean, if you're looking to go to sleep, put this record on. You'll go to sleep by the 3rd track, most likely. Either that, or you're going to be scrambling to turn this record off as soon as tracks like Tangerine Girl come up, where Roth's awful singing over this really atmospheric instrumental is just too much for me to handle. Some of the beats are okay, but lyrically, Roth is as uninteresting as ever. And for everyone who's just listening to this record to get high to it, you could be getting high to better music. You deserve better. Next, the new Merkabah record. Many of you may not know about this LP. I checked out the band, found them out on Bandcamp. I recommend that you go see that Bandcamp, give it a listen if you're into doom metal, avant-garde metal, metal fused with jazz music. This is a really lush and gloomy record. I mean, there's a lot of color to this thing, but it's very dark and spacious as well. The riffs are heavy. However, I didn't really find there to be a lot of electricity between the band as they were playing. Just listening to the band play these songs out just felt kind of, I don't know, uneventful. But still, I do think they have an interesting sound. I think they have an interesting tone that is worth checking out if you're looking for heavy stuff that has some instrumental diversity. Next, the new Wye Oak record, which has more synthesizers kind of leading the way in terms of instrumentation. But to me, that's the most significant change that this record makes. It's just a bit of a change in terms of instrumentation, a bit of window dressing change. How the band functions at their core really isn't that different to me. Personally, I just prefer my pop music to be a little less dreamy, a little stronger, a little bolder, a little bit more impactful, and that's why Wye Oak just isn't, you know, one of those bands that I'm that interested in. Next, the new Woods record. Passed on reviewing this thing. Unfortunately, you know, Woods, I've reviewed pretty much every record they have put out, you know, studio full lengths, ever since they put out Songs of Shame. You know, I actually had to delete that review a while ago because of I had song clips in the review. That's why I had to delete all my 2009 output, but I digress. In this new LP of theirs, I'm finding it to be a lot like their last album in terms of the instrumentation just sounding way less reverb-soaked than their older stuff, just way sunnier, way brighter, way more upbeat. There are a few tracks on here that have a kind of psychedelic jam sessions on them that I like a lot. However, in terms of songwriting, I just thought there were some potholes on this record. And, you know, just overall in terms of sound, in terms of tone, in terms of style, this record is just kind of Woods like usual. And I felt that if I did a review of this new record, I'd kind of just be saying a lot of the same things that I've said about their past few records. You know, I wasn't blown away by it. I didn't love it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was decent. And, you know, again, like I said with their last LP when I reviewed that, Woods is just kind of one of those bands that changes their sound and evolves incrementally. However, the change in between this record and their last one is so incremental that I just didn't see any reason in just making a review. Again, it's not a bad record, and if you're looking for indie flavored folk rock with some psychedelic undertones, then this thing is worth looking up. But don't be surprised if you dig into their back catalog, if this is your intro to them, and find that a lot of their older stuff sounds a little too similar to you. The new ODONIS record, I thought this LP was an interesting mix of a lot of dark underground rock styles, from post-punk to noise rock to gothic rock to industrial. It was just a little too hit or miss in terms of songwriting for me. I thought that the band tended to wear their influences on their sleeves a little too much, to the point where this record as a whole is kind of drowning in its influences a little bit. You know, there's no one sound or idea or theme or persona that I get out of this LP. It's kind of like this mixed bag, this sampler of like post-punk / gothic rock styles from the late 70s, early mid 80s. There definitely are standout tracks on here like Are We Friends, you know, killer single, but I'm waiting for the band to kind of come together with a more uniform, distinct sound that is the thread that runs through all the tracks that they write. Next, the new Autopsy record, death metal band, classic death metal band. They have a few death metal classics under their belts. Check them out. I ended up passing on this LP, not because I thought it was bad or anything like that. It's certainly better than their last album, which had a few tracks on it that I thought ended abruptly, weren't really all that fleshed out, or kind of got boring in the midst of hearing them play out. This new LP of theirs, I think, is built a little better. I'm noticing some harmonized guitar solos on this thing, or just a little more melody in general. Of course, Autopsy has one of the best drummers in death metal. Autopsy also has one of the most gruesome vocalists in death metal. And when it comes to those two things, they do live up to the standards that they have set in the past. However, this is just really Autopsy as usual for me. I felt that aside from just more fleshed out songs and a little more melodic color, I was pretty much going to be saying a lot of the same stuff about this record that I did their past record. Not saying that's a bad thing. If you are a death metal fan, give this thing a listen, but you probably already know this record exists because, I mean, if you're a huge death metal fan, you kind of have to know who the hell Autopsy is. Next, the new Teebs LP. Unfortunately, I did end up passing on this, but if you are looking for wonky, ambient, electronic beat music off of Brainfeeder Records, then do give this LP a listen. While I think that this record is more interesting than Teebs' past work that tended to be just a jumble of shorter tracks, assembled in a pretty large group, these songs felt a little more fleshed out, a little more structured. To me, still, the tone of the record wasn't that gripping or wasn't that interesting. I mean, at best, it sort of is pretty mood-setting background music, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I mean, as far as music that kind of hangs in the air, you could definitely do much worse. Even though these tracks didn't really hold my interest, I do think that Teebs does have a way with soundcraft, as a lot of people on Brainfeeder Records do. You know, there are some very pretty, beautiful, and just gorgeous sounds littered throughout these beats. Finally, to close out, the new KELIS record, Food. This LP for me was a bit of an interesting one. It was a surprise in that there is a lot of sonic variety on this thing. There's a country ballad on this thing. As you would expect, there are poppier tracks, there are smoother, more soulful neo-soul tracks, there are contemporary R&B tracks on this thing. However, I think at this point in her career, instrumentally and songwriting-wise as well, KELIS is maybe at her most dynamic and organic as well. This record really feels like a very personal, intimate record from KELIS. However, I think every musical side of this album, you know, it depicts different genres and different flavors across the record, with each song kind of being named after a different food to sort of reference, oh, this song's a certain flavor, this song's a certain mood, this song's a certain this, this song's a certain that. To sort of run with that analogy, there were some foods on the menu that just had more spice than others, while some felt kind of run-of-the-mill or bland, or like, whoa, I could get this kind of chicken anywhere. However, I just mean that in terms of the song and the instrumentation. Vocally, KELIS, I think, is still steps ahead than a lot of new singers that people are making a big deal of in contemporary R&B now. And those are all the records that I guess I wanted to touch down on. Cool? Cool. Transition, if you've given these LPs a listen, what did you think of any of them? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Why? And have a nice day. Anthony Fantano, Yunoreview. That wasn't too bad. It's all right. Forever.